Hello everybody, welcome back to Mystery Disappearance and other cases. Today we're going to do something a little different, although it does feature a disappearance, but we will focus on a different aspect. Enter Shawn Hornbeck, an 11-year-old boy who disappeared October 6, 2002. Wow, October 2002 again. Seems to be a very cursed month, doesn't it? Joshua Guimond had some interesting computer activity going on in October before he disappeared on November 9th. Chris Jenkins vanished on Halloween night, and Shawn Hornbeck disappeared on October 6th from his little town of Richwoods, Missouri. Obviously, these cases have no connection with each other, but definitely a weird coincidence that we're coming back to this particular month of 2002. Anyway, the disappearance of Shawn was another case that received a lot of media attention at the time. Shawn Hornbeck was born on July 17, 1991. Growing up in Richwoods, Missouri, a small town with a population of approximately 1,600 people, his mom is named Pam Akers. Pam eventually marries Craig Akers, a good man who serves as the model father figure to Shawn and his two older sisters, Jackie and Jennifer. Shawn is a polite, friendly, smiley, happy-go-lucky kid. On Sunday, October 6, 2002, 1 p.m., Shawn was bored at home and asked his parents if he could take his bike and go visit a friend. His parents tell him yes, but to be home by 5 p.m. for dinner. Shawn vanishes and never makes it to his friend. It didn't take long for Pam and Craig Akers in early evening to call the police, friends, and neighbors to help them look for Shawn. Soon, a lot of people from the community were helping the Akers search. Canines could pick up his scent, but otherwise no trace of Shawn was found, not even his bike. As the weeks turned into months and searches began to scale back, the Akers kept searching, going through all their resources, money saved, retirement, everything. They spent it all on looking for Shawn. They set up the Shawn Hornbeck Foundation, dedicated to finding Shawn and other abducted children. The Akers attempted other venues as well. They went on a show called Beyond, where they consulted a psychic by the name of James Van Prague. Van Prague initially states that Shawn is alive, that a truck was involved, that the name Eddie or Edward wasn't the abductor's name. Eventually the story changes to Shawn is dead, his body in a freight train car at some railroad workplace, with a worker there being the perpetrator. They also appeared on the Montel Williams show to ask then-famed psychic Sylvia Brown, who tells the Akers Shawn is dead and gives details on the abductor and abduction. Shawn was taken by a really dark-skinned man who isn't black. He has long black hair worn in dreadlocks. He drives an older blue sedan. His body is in a wooded area 20 miles southwest of Richwoods, near two large jagged boulders. This led the Akers on a wild goose chase, exploring these theories, spending time and money, but without success. All these predictions would later prove to be false, by the way. I personally don't believe in psychics, and this is why I think they can be dangerous, preying on people's chagrin and desperation. Time goes on and there are no signs of Shawn. 1 year passes, then 2, then 3, and 4 years pass with no result whatsoever. Finally, on January 8, 2007, Pam and Craig Akers watched the news at home, and a news report of a 13-year-old boy named Ben Ownby disappears from his town of Beaufort. The Akers immediately draw parallels with the disappearance of their own son and wonder if in fact there is a connection. On January 12, 4 days later, Craig and Pam are driving home from work in a rainstorm. They both get a phone call on their cell phones. They miss the call, so a message goes to voicemail. Pam listens to the message. It is from their attorney's office. They call them back and they are asked to stop on the side of the road for some news. Nervous, the Akers stop their car on the side of the road. The attorney tells Craig, "We are 90% sure we have found Shawn and he's alive." Craig simply tells Pam he's alive. They drive to the police station where Shawn is waiting. It is the happiest reunion. Shawn, now 15 years old, is home. Ben Ownby reunites with his parents as well. He was in fact kidnapped by the same man that had taken Shawn. Shawn and the Akers were thrust into the spotlight, the news gaining national attention. They appear on various news shows and are even guests on Oprah. This is one mystery disappearance that has a happy ending. The Akers finally learned the truth they were craving for 4.5 years. Where was Shawn? What happened? Little by little, Shawn reveals what happened to him on that fateful day he disappeared and the following years. Going back to October 6, 2002, Shawn is driving his bike heading towards his friend's house. It is a desolate highway with much nature around. He hears a vehicle approaching him, but doesn't think much of it. It is a white pickup truck. It approaches and knocks Shawn off his bicycle. Quickly, a large man picks up Shawn, bounds and gags him, threatens him with a gun, and puts him and his bicycle in his truck. Shawn asks the stranger, "Why are you doing this?" He responds with, "You were just at the wrong place at the wrong time." Unbeknown to Shawn, he is driven about 46 miles northeast of Richwoods, about 55 minutes away to Kirkwood. So, not 20 miles southwest as suggested by Sylvia Brown. In the stranger's small apartment, Shawn's terror begins. During the first month, Shawn is bound and gagged and is tied to a futon while the stranger goes to work. When the stranger is home, Shawn gets sexually assaulted repeatedly. After almost a month, around Halloween 2002, the stranger drives Shawn to a wooded area with the intention of ending his life. They go outside the truck and the stranger proceeds to strangle him. Shawn begins pleading for his life, saying that he'll do whatever the stranger wants to stay alive. Shawn manages to save his own life and convinces the stranger not to kill him, but by making a deal with the devil. Shawn is never allowed to try to escape, to contact anybody, and if he does, the stranger will kill him. He owns a rifle and several guns. Shawn is systematically physically assaulted, sexually assaulted, and threatened. Thus, Shawn is terrorized into accepting the terms of his captor and remains true to his word in exchange for staying alive. This stranger is Michael Devlin, a 37-year-old manager at an Emo's Pizzeria and part-time funeral home worker. A large man of 6'4" and 300 pounds, known as a loner. Shawn is forced to become Shawn Devlin, Michael Devlin's godson, and a script is created. Shawn doesn't go to school, but will tell people that he is homeschooled. He will tell people that his mother died in a car accident. Remarkably, as months go by, Shawn earns more trust from his captor and is no longer bound, gagged, or tied. He is left alone at the apartment. He can even leave the apartment, ride his bicycle, and is even allowed to make a friend. In the meantime, Michael Devlin can go to work, can visit his family, can go shopping, etc., with no fear of leaving Shawn on his own. Shawn makes a new friend in the neighborhood named Tony and grows closer to his family, the Douglas family. All this time, Shawn sticks to his script and never reveals his situation or that his father is actually his kidnapper. In an interview, the Douglas family revealed that they thought Shawn was spoiled. Devlin bought him bicycles, video game systems, anything Shawn wanted. Shawn and Tony do various things as best friends would. They go to malls, restaurants, balloon races, they spend holidays together, and Shawn even has sleepovers at Tony's. The relationship of kidnapper and captive remains between Shawn and Devlin, with the sexual assault still occurring, but to a small extent also mimics a form of parent-son relationship. He remains loyal to his captor, driven by fear, terror, and possibly has a twisted sense of loyalty and gratitude for keeping him alive. After all, Shawn is still fed and sheltered by his captor. By 2007, after more than 4 years, Shawn is 15 years old and has seemingly outgrown Devlin's age of interest. He wants to kidnap another boy. Michael Devlin decides to drive to Beaufort, taking Shawn with him as his accomplice. Of course, Shawn is actively against this idea, stating that no other boy should have to go through what he went through. But this falls on deaf ears. Devlin goes through with his plan. On January 8, 2007, he kidnaps Ben Ownby, a 13-year-old boy who was getting off the bus after school. However, this less discreet kidnapping would be Michael Devlin's undoing. A 15-year-old by the name of Mitchell Hultz witnesses the kidnapping and the white Nissan pickup truck as it drives away at 3:30 p.m. He remembers in remarkable detail the type of truck, the color, the various rusting spots on the truck, a 2-inch trailer hitch, and no hubcaps on the wheels. Young Mitchell couldn't remember the license plate, but he still brought all the information he knew to the authorities. They took casts of the tire tracks in the gravel road, and all the information on the vehicle was broadcast. Mike Prosperi, the owner of the pizzeria where Devlin manages, catches the news report and gets suspicious. Devlin has gone home supposedly sick on Monday around lunchtime and had called in sick the next 2 days as well, which was unusual for Devlin. As pieces of information start adding up, Mike Prosperi drives by Devlin's apartment and notices the red gravel on Devlin's tires, which there are no such roads in Kirkwood. The next day, FBI agent Lynn Willett arrives at the pizzeria where Devlin works to verify him and the truck. They search the white Nissan pickup As Lynn Willett chit-chats with Michael Devlin, she realizes something is off. As she keeps chatting and probing him, the truth finally comes out. The FBI agents drive to Devlin's apartment. They open the door and Ben Ownby bolts from the couch and rushes to hug his rescuers. Shawn Hornbeck remains on the couch, holding his video game controller, shocked and frozen in place as to what is happening. Shawn's days of captivity and tortures are over. Shawn and Ben are reunited with their families. Various news media covered the story and both boys finally go home. The heartwarming reunion is dubbed the Missouri Miracle. As for Michael Devlin, he is arrested and taken into custody on January 12, 2007. A bond is put on him in each of the jurisdictions, all being $1 million or more, and he initially pleads not guilty with the advice of his lawyers. On October 6, 2007, he eventually changes his plea to guilty when various videos and devices depicting Shawn's abuse are recovered by authorities. They found the two kidnapped boys in his apartment and videos on multiple sexual abuse of a minor and several guns, so obviously Devlin has no defense whatsoever. The guilty plea avoids a trial, and Shawn and Ben don't have to go to court to testify against their former tormentor. Devlin has charges spanning 4 jurisdictions and is charged with 80 counts of sexual assault, kidnapping, and attempted murder. Ultimately, Devlin is sentenced to serve 74 life terms plus 2,020 years. The amount is calculated to about 4,240 years. Wow, and that's with the guilty plea. Can you imagine if he pled not guilty and would get convicted? Supposedly he could get parole at 100, but I think it's safe to say he's not getting out. Authorities investigated other missing or murdered children cases, but they were never able to link them to Devlin. He was 37 years old when he abducted Shawn, so you can't help but wonder what his activities were the years prior. In 2020, a Canadian man did step forward to reveal that he recognized Devlin's picture as the man who had tried to get him to enter his truck back in 1998. So that's one attempt. How many more were there? It was definitely a major stroke of luck that Shawn Hornbeck was rescued. We definitely have 15-year-old Mitchell Hulse to thank. I shudder to think about what Shawn's future would have been like if he had never been found. At 15, he had already outgrown Devlin's age of interest, so did Devlin plan to replace Shawn with the younger Ownby? Or did the captor grow enough of an emotional bond with Shawn to keep him around? Shawn also had no ID or social security number with him in 4.5 years of captivity, so what if Shawn needed to go to a hospital? What would have happened once Shawn reaches 18 years old or 20? It's definitely disturbing to think that Shawn's life could have ended at any time that Devlin was inconvenienced. I think most likely Shawn had earned enough of Devlin's trust so that Devlin would have kept him around for as long as possible. Supposedly Devlin was teaching Shawn how to drive. I imagine he probably would have turned Shawn into his accomplice to kidnap other boys. Ben Ownby probably would have been killed shortly after. But let's just be thankful that that didn't happen and the story ended when it did. As I mentioned earlier, Shawn was thrust into doing a lot of media with his parents. It was such a shocking and uplifting story. People wanted to know more about Shawn's bravery and resilience, about surviving the ordeal, and what happened to him in the last 4+ years in captivity. Let me ask you guys a question. When we talk about people living in captivity, who springs into your mind? Do you maybe think about the Ariel Castro case, a man who abducted 3 young women as teenagers and kept them imprisoned in his house for 11 years? Or do you maybe think about JC Dugard, who was kidnapped at 11 and was forced to live 18 years in her kidnapper's secluded backyard, and even gave birth to children from her captor? Obviously, all of these cases are different. In the Ariel Castro case, Michelle Knight, Gina De Jesus, and Amanda Berry were consistently tied inside a house with soundproofing walls and locked windows. We can't say that they developed much of a bond with Castro just for survival. There were prisoners there, simple as that. In the JC Dugard case, JC was most of the time confined to the secluded backyard, but she was sometimes inside the house itself and sometimes even went with her captor to other locations, never revealing her identity. She was seeing her captor, Philip Garrido, as a parental figure for her and the kids she had with Garrido. Very twisted relationship. What mystified people about the Shawn Hornbeck case was the amount of freedom he had with his captor. Being able to leave the house whenever he wanted, make a friend, sleep over at his friend, celebrate various events with his friend Tony and their family. He was even allowed to have a cell phone and internet access. As more of Shawn's story came to light, people were baffled. Why didn't Shawn try to escape his abductor? Why did he never reach out for help? It was wondered if Shawn had developed some form of Stockholm Syndrome. If you don't know what that is, Stockholm Syndrome is defined as this. Stockholm Syndrome is a proposed condition or theory that tries to explain why hostages sometimes develop a psychological bond with their captors. It is supposed to result from a rather specific set of circumstances, namely the power imbalances contained in hostage-taking, kidnapping, and abusive relationships. These are considered irrational by some in light of the danger or risk endured by the victims. So, could Shawn have developed a form of bond with his captor, and his captor with him? Well, I think it's a little more complicated than that. I think it's safe to say that Shawn never had any positive feelings towards his captor, being kidnapped and subjected to physical and sexual abuse. While Shawn was tied and gagged during the first month of his captivity, he could only go in survival mode. Once Devlin attempted to end his life, Shawn made a deal with the devil, a deal that he never broke. There is a power differential, and Shawn is at the mercy of his captor. His captor is his shelter, his food. As human beings, whether we realize it or not, we always make bonds, even if the bond is completely toxic. This is true even more for young kids. We always look to create a comfort zone, even if that comfort zone is not ideal or downright dangerous. It is survival. Shawn can only appease his captor as best he can. The bond is dominated by fear, reinforced with violence, and to a certain extent, Shawn feels indebted to his captor, indebted for sparing his life, and in a twisted sense of loyalty, complies to every demand. Devlin doesn't need to restrain or tie Shawn anymore, because the chains have become psychological. A reward system is then put in place. Devlin seemingly buys Shawn whatever he wants, a new bicycle, a video game system, etc. Shawn is completely dependent on his captor and loses the will to run away and escape, in fear of grave repercussions. Remember, Devlin has guns, and most likely he knows Shawn's address. I presume Devlin must have asked Shawn his home address early on, though we don't know this for sure. Shawn's running away could put himself and his family in great danger. Shawn has no choice but to slowly settle into this new reality. Over time, this mindset spirals into Shawn's mind, and escape just isn't an option anymore. Shawn would love to be rescued, but just can't make that step himself. The victim is overwhelmed by the situation, feels powerless, unable to strategize. You fall into a new reality, and it is just unfathomable to escape. Devlin's control is so absolute that, even when Shawn rides his bicycle with his friend Tony after curfew hours, they get stopped by police. They get questioned, but then they get sent home. Shawn never reveals his true identity, and the police never put two and two together. Shawn even visited the internet website dedicated to his search, and left a couple of emails to his parents, vague clues that his parents never picked up on. In another instance, Shawn is sitting in the living room of the Douglas family. A news report on him flashes on the screen. Tony's parents jokingly ask Shawn, noticing the resemblance, "Is that you?" Shawn doesn't even flinch by responding, "No." There were a couple of instances when Shawn was spotted during captivity. He was spotted at Six Flags by a boy who went to school with him, but because of uncertainty it was never called in. Devlin sometimes took Shawn to shopping malls or other outings, but again, no help. The Shawn Hornbeck case is actually reminiscent of the Steven Stainer case. Steven Stainer was kidnapped at age 7 by convicted child molester Kenneth Parnell. Because of Parnell's manipulations, Steve lived with his kidnapper for 7 years. Stainer was forced to become Parnell's son. He had plenty of freedom as well during his captivity. He was allowed to go out, drink with friends, could come home at any hour of the night, could have a girlfriend, etc. Again, Stainer would have had plenty of occasions to escape, but because he adapted to this new reality, he didn't know how to escape. He only finally escaped when Parnell kidnapped a 5-year-old boy. Stainer finally decided to take the boy out of there. They were discovered by police, and Steven Stainer's captivity was over. Both Shawn and Steven Stainer were very young when kidnapped, so they were much more vulnerable to coercion, and at those young ages, kids are resilient and adapt to their new realities, and are too afraid to ask for help. The concept of Stockholm Syndrome is difficult for people to grasp. It plays on our desires to belong or form bonds, and it is a very psychological need that comes from a place of distress and survival. I think this can apply to people in abusive relationships. Some of these abusive relationships go on for years, and you wonder, why doesn't the abuse victim just leave? Or children victim of abuse by their own parents. It's actually rare that the children will report the abuse on their own. It's usually motivated by a third party, or the third party reports the abuse themselves. Human bonds are complicated. Today, Shawn Hornbeck is alive and well. Being in the 5th grade when he was abducted, he had missed 4 years of school, but he caught up to his peers in a year and a half. Today he has his work and is even married with kids. He keeps a very low profile, and I can't really blame him. I'm sure he doesn't want people to come up to him and recount his horrible experience, though apparently he does meet a lot of people who want to give him a hug, and he happily obliges. He prefers to stay out of the media as much as possible. Even once he was rescued, he was thrust into many televised interviews and even appeared on Oprah. I wonder if this could have been too much for Shawn, who had lived a sheltered, quiet life in captivity. But at the same time, I guess it was inevitable. It was such a powerful story and a great surprise. Kidnapped kids usually have a terrible fate, if they manage to live past their first day. Shawn's story was inspirational and his resilience undeniable. Michael Devlin is still alive today as well, in prison for the rest of his life. I wonder if Devlin has received any form of therapy in prison, but then again, what's the point? You can't rehabilitate this person, and luckily he'll never get out of prison, nor ever be near children ever again. So, Shawn, you'll probably never see this video, but my message to you is thank you for being so strong. You survived something unimaginable, and today you're with your family where you always belonged. You're an inspiration, and keep up the positive message. God bless.